Uh, all right, so welcome to the official kickoff of the Steam Workshop development. Um, we are some of Handelabra Games, not all of Handelabra Games, but I wanted to bring on Jean-Marc, David, and Jennifer as they are the most involved in the Sentinel stuff and will be involved in the development of the stuff. We're going to be just sort of doing a kickoff meeting, doing a big overview of what's going on with the project and talking about that kind of thing. And then I'm going to be getting into some actual prototyping and development stuff. The gang's mostly here, yeah. There was actually, so I'm going to get everyone on the team to introduce themselves, maybe just talk a quick bit about what you do and that sort of thing. And maybe what's your favorite board game you're playing lately? So I can go first. I'm John. I am the tech lead at Handelabra Games, and I work on mostly these days on the front end stuff of the game. So what you see on the screen in terms of like how it works functionally, and not necessarily how it looks. That's not my department. I make things that look terrible, and Jennifer makes them look great. But it's got to work to begin with, so that's what I work on. Sometimes delve into other programming and stuff like that too. And lately, I like playing Wingspan quite a bit, and Eon's End actually on the tabletop. Been playing a bunch of that, and of course, Sentinels all the time. Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right. As John mentioned, am I unmuted now? I think. As John mentioned, I do a lot of visual stuff for the UI. And I think UI design is probably the main thing I'm doing at this point. I've done a lot of things over the last 6.5 years. I made the environments for the environment backgrounds for Sentinels. I've done some engine programming, but mainly UI, and yeah, and that's about it. Should I pass it along, or does someone else want to talk?
Yeah, I guess
Sure.
stand-up style. Pass it off.
I guess it's stand-up style. How about jean-marc?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jean-Marc Giffen. I work on um, the engine with David for various games and do pretty much all the audio work at this point for Handelabra. Um, with two young kids, I don't get to play very many board games these days, but my son made one up that he showed me yesterday. Um, in which you start off playing Snakes and Ladders, but then you change to Sorry and you jump 5 spaces, and then you roll a ball around a road until you get to an umbrella or a tent, in which case you have to balance fruit to win.
Coming soon from Handelabra Games.
And he calls it Mix Up Shovel.
Nice. That's cool. A budding game designer.
Um, and so, yeah, go ahead, David.
Hi, I'm David. I do engine stuff, lots of stuff in Spirit Island and Sentinels and Eon's End mostly. But yeah, I program rules and cards and such. And I don't know if it really counts as board games, but I've been playing a lot of tabletop wargaming, Star Wars Armada and 40K.
Oh, that totally counts.
And I guess I'm last.
Yeah. So actually, that's like a little like mini stand-up almost. Every morning, as a peek into our process, we all have a call and do a little stand-up. Which, if you're familiar with Agile process, it's basically talk about what you've been working on the last day, what you're going to work on today, and what's your if you're being blocked by anything, so we can make sure that people have work to do and are moving forward. So yeah, and we do this little
And
thing where we pass it off to the next person and try to remember who's gone.
and just for anybody who decides to start doing game development remotely like we do, I think those are very important because before Handelabra, I was with another group and we had a meeting like once every 2 weeks and nobody had any idea what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something I picked up from a team I worked with. I'm trying to think of when I first did a stand-up. It definitely wasn't like when I was working like at a more traditional companies. It might have been something I actually started with Handelabra, and then I've also experienced at other companies, but sort of agile with a lowercase a. That's how we do it. So yeah, and this project is going to be a little different because often with a project, it'll be like, all right, we're going to be working on expansion X, and let's start. This week we're going to get to this and plan our sprint and everything. But with this project, it's more like we have a plan for what we want to do, but it's only one day a week, and so it's hard to like do it that way. So it's going to be a little more casual, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll adapt our process as we move forward. But the first steps are going to be planning and prototyping and stuff. So I've got this Google Doc. We use Google Docs a lot. It's very convenient. We still use Skype. I know some people are shocked that Skype is on the screen. But for all of its problems, it's been the most... It's not reliable, but it's the least non-reliable option that we found over the years. So we stuck with it. Maybe something will be better, like reliably better someday, but we haven't found it yet. I wanted to actually look through the chat quickly because there was a question I wanted Jean-Marc to answer about. Menzer asked about sheet music for the piano version. Is that a thing that we did release that at some point, right?
Oh yeah, I think that was a first anniversary thing. Yeah, I'll dig it up and make it available again.
Cool. It's probably like on a blog post somewhere as a PDF, I imagine, but who knows when exactly and where that is. So,
what happened to it?
And
It's
there's
somewhere.
Boisange asked about season 2 hero themes. Do you have any thoughts about those?
If there's ever a reason to do them, we'll do them.
Yeah. It's a bit of work to make that many songs, as it turns out. So
it's yeah, I mean, I know some other composers who are like, oh yeah, I did the entire soundtrack for this one game in a day, and I'm just like, oh, I got a work in progress done for one song for one game. People just work at different paces and have different workflows and stuff like that. So
yeah, and it turned like there's like 20 songs or on the order of 20 songs, like, and then there's like another. It's like the same amount for season 2, so maybe slightly smaller, but it's still a lot.
I think it's 11 for season 2. So
okay, but yeah, still quite a bit. And JZC found a link that probably has the sheet music, I imagine then. So,
yes,
in the Greater Than Games
Thank
forums.
You.
Very good. Yeah. So we'll try to keep an eye on the chat while we're in this call here. But if I miss your message, sorry about that. But I'll try to look at it once in a while and try not to miss too much. So we're going to be talking about I do have another doc. Where's my other doc? Hang on. Just have to arrange my browser windows to get the right things I need on the screen. But not that screen you're seeing, a different screen. Okay. I have 2 screens. I don't have like NORAD. I don't even. What is your setups at home, everyone? I have an iMac with like an extra screen next to it, but I'm not sure what everyone else is set up. I know Jean-Marc has evolved into this super robotic music area.
Yeah, it's an adjustable standing desk with. I used to have multiple monitors, but then, as in display monitors. But once I had real monitors on this thing, like audio monitors, speakers, some might say, and a microphone and everything, I just had to resort to one screen. And then I have like a keyboard on the left side, a piano keyboard. I always have to specify. 'Cause
Yeah, that's true.
it could be ambiguous. And then like drum pads on the right here. So.
How about you, David?
I've only got the one screen, so I make ample use of Microsoft's multi-desktop feature. The dream is to get like 4 screens and have a crazy like
Yeah, go full NORAD.
flight stick setup.
And Jen?
I am just using one screen, but for like a long time, I just would use like a 17-inch laptop, and then I tried like a 24-inch regular monitor, and I'm like, wow, I've got so much more screen space. But yeah, 2 screens would probably be nice. Maybe I'll try that sometime. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last 5 years, I was basically traveling for most of the year, so I was just on a laptop for most of the time. But now that I'm back in Halifax for a while, I have an iMac, and I found the second screen is really useful for like just putting Slack on, and it's really useful for streaming because then you get another stream that's like OBS is over there and any other stuff, and then your game or whatever is on the main screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can afford the physical space of a second screen,
Yeah.
it is very helpful.
I don't know that I really can. It's like balanced on a printer, but it works. 2 screens not connected to the same machine. I guess that works too. I mean, if I counted the number of screens in my house, it would be definitely in the double digits. Maybe not triple digits, but double digits. There are many screens and devices. Okay, so enough of that. I mean, that was fun. Let's talk about Steam Workshop. We did have a little bit of a intro meeting yesterday, so it's not like, surprise team, we're talking about this today, and you have to come into it blind. But we're going to sort of recap a little bit and talk about some of the things we went over, and to give everyone in the community a look into it. And also, there's going to be new things will pop up as well. So as a sort of overarching, some high-level stuff we want to talk about first. I think one of the most important things to think about is what kind of mods we want to support. And in terms of support, it's more like what types of mods we want to like provide the most help with making. I kind of think about it like it's like this wilderness. Making mods is kind of the wilderness and a thick forest. But if we can like provide a path or a road for people to go down, it's going to be easier for people to go down that road as opposed to bushwhacking into the other areas. So the things we want to like encourage people to make will provide the road for that. And if people want to bushwhack, they're going to bushwhack, right? Like you see mods for other games where like clearly they're doing whatever they want, and that's totally fine. But if we can provide them, make it easy to do certain things, then people are going to do that as well. So that kind of like the focus of support we're looking at, as we talked about sort of as a bullet point thing, is about new content. So making new full decks, hero, environment, villain, team villain, right? That's a different kind of deck than a regular villain. Variants for existing decks. That would be like hero variants, villain variants. Team villains don't have variants right now, so that would actually be more work for us to deal with, but not impossible. Something that we might want to think about. Well, I mean, I'm sure will want to make one, so we'll have to think about that. Right now, I think the game assumes that doesn't exist and doesn't try to provide a button in those cases and stuff. So that's probably something that someone's going to be like, I made this mod and it breaks the game. I'll be like, oh, we need to fix that. And then Oblivion Editions, I think, are a really interesting thing. Like new shields, new scions, new mission cards. I think that could really be a cool I actually in the last year I've been really digging playing Oblivion as like a solo, almost like roguelike Slay the Spire type of thing. It's like a really good puzzle challenge, and like adding more to that could be really cool.
Yeah, and I feel like variants and Oblivion stuff in particular is a really good way for people to get their feet wet in modding without the
Yeah,
commitment that a full deck requires.
right. It's like, well, now here's a legacy that gives everyone +2. Aha. Yeah, definitely. It's and it's easy to like. I mean, it's more relatively easy to create that, and then you have that like. It's one card you have to make, as opposed to, you know, for a hero, it's like probably like 15 unique cards or something like that in a typical hero deck. 15 to 20 unique cards, which is like a lot if you consider also the artwork and all the other resources we'll be talking about in a bit, to have like
Yeah.
a fully featured mod.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Was it's like, oh, I want to add something, but you know, it's a lot of work for a hero. So it's like, oh, I'll make a variant and publish it and see what happens. So.
Cool. Yeah. So for us, like that's kind of the main thing we want to like build that path or build that highway for, is helping people create new content. Because I think that's, at least to me, that's like the most exciting thing. If you look at like what people have done in the community, is like the cauldron or new variants, sets for things, like brand new stuff that integrates in with what's there already. And so that's what we want to focus on the most. But we'll talk a bit about other types of mods too, because we know people are going to want to do them. There's already some questions, like Hank Royd asks, will it be possible to modify existing deck, and things like that. And so obviously those are things that people are going to want to do. So modifying existing content, right? Like changing an existing card, or like removing cards from a deck. This is something that we're not, I mean, it's something people are going to want to do. It's something we're not as, I think, focused on, because like the content in the game is already balanced and greater than games like made it. And I think we don't necessarily want to be encouraging changing it. Like if you want to make something new, make something new. But that's still what some people are going to want to do. And I think that's probably something a future thing. So it's something we have to talk to Greater Than Games about. What's their feelings about that. And we haven't actually talked to them about like what's their temperature on modifying existing content as for mods. I know people are going to do it. They're going to bushwhack and do it, which is totally fine. But we'll have to talk to them about that if that's something we want to like support directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean we can provide some of the code for existing decks. So you know, somebody, like, rather than modifying the existing one, you basically make your own that's a copy of it with the changes you want, and you can call it Mega C or whatever. You know?
Yeah, that's potentially something, especially if it's like, you know, really different. Then it's like you're really creating something new, right? And not just like I want back fist strike to do 5 damage instead of 4 or something like that. Like, you know, what's a different sort of what's a Schmegacy deck look like that's like actually, if Christopher has talked a bit about, like, for Earth Prime, he had to make a speedster character, right? But he's making it in a totally different way than Tachyon. And so like that's something you could think about, is like, I want to make a new version of Legacy, Schmegacy or whatever, that's fine. But like, how would you make that character, you know, looking at all the other ideas you could make for a deck? That's kind of an interesting way to look at it too. As opposed to just like, I want back fist strike to do 1 more damage, or I want Expatriate to do something different with her deck. Maybe there's a new kind of Expatriate that goes beyond a variant, but it's a full deck that's new. Anyway, so that's kind of one category. There's also, and Jennifer brought this up yesterday, was the idea of house rules. And we actually get this question, not often, but once in a while for games, where people might ask like, oh, I wish I could play with a different house rule. Like can't remember any particular examples, but you could imagine things like you start the game with more cards in hand, or draw extra cards at different times, or things like that just sort of change the basic rules of the game. And those are mods that we could definitely consider supporting at some point. There's also like UI changes, which you see in some games, like Slay the Spire is an example that has like several UI mods that are like giving you reminders about stuff or showing additional information on the screen and stuff. And that's something that's would be harder for us to support directly. More of a bushwhacking kind of situation, but it's something that is definitely a category of mods people are going to be looking at making at some point. And then tools and support mods. And you see this in other mod communities where people will make mods that make it easier to make mods. And we're definitely, I don't think there's anything that we can directly do besides what we're already doing to support making those. People are just going to make those, and that's cool. So that's sort of the high level of like different kinds of mods, at least that I've thought about. We thought about. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts about other kinds of mods that maybe we haven't thought about there, but that's a list. And yeah, so the focus for us is the new content type of mods, at least initially. This is, a project that can be going for pretty much forever, right? There's always future stuff we can do on it. So, and yeah, we briefly mentioned it in the previous part, but we want to potentially be able to bring the best and popular mods to mobile as DLC, because on iOS especially, iOS doesn't support like game mods really, because there's really restrictive limitations on bringing in new code to a game. It needs to be part of an app update officially and stuff like that. And so there's been a little bit, I've seen this sort of thing before with Rock Band. Rock Band actually has had like a DLC platform, Rock Band Network, where people could create their own stuff and post it up, but that wasn't available on like the Wii, I believe, at the time. But so then they would say, the most popular ones, the best songs, we'll make DLC packs for Wii and have them on there from the Rock Band Network. And so that kind of idea is what we're thinking about. Seamus Butler says, changes to the cars, most notably different splat boxes for HP and replacing the Sentinel Comics logo. I think the Sentinel Comics logo is just part of the art files for those, and the HP is just like a number. So, but yeah, maybe some things there. Oh, you mean like the target boxes in the corners? Those are actually always the same on digital. They're not like on the tabletop. On the tabletop, they're different, but on the digital version, they're always the same, and that's intentional. So, but potentially that could be a UI mod that someone could make. Cool. So that's sort of the just overview of like what kind of mods and what's our initial focus of like what do we have to do to help support mods, and our focus is on helping people make new content as opposed to helping people make these sorts of mods, which we can get to in the future, but we have to decide something, right? We could decide, we only want to support people making house rules and make it hard, and then it's going to be hard for people to make new content. We don't want that. So we got somewhere to start. Cool. So with that in mind, the next part I want to talk about is how do we actually do it? And when I think about this, I think about how much work. There's a balance between how much work we have to do to let people make mods and how much the people making mods have to do to make their mod. Like, we can do a ton of work to make it like super easy for people to make mods, or we can do we could do nothing, and you have already literally someone has made a mod or two by like decompiling the code and finding the place to make their changes and modifying the DLL and making a patch and all this sort of shenanigans. That's like classic modding, right? Like original modding, there was no support from the developers. It was like someone just doing it. And people have just done it. We've helped them a little bit by like telling them some information and stuff. But, that's kind of the balance between how much do we do to support it and how hard is it for people making the mods. And we want to find a balance that's like, we can't spend the rest of our lives making support code for mods. We need to like figure out something that's reasonable, and so that it's a point for that people who want to make mods, they can actually get into it without it being too difficult. So there's a balance there. So there's sort of two big areas of mods for this game. Number one is the code, right? Which is, what do the cards do? Primarily, right? Or like things like hit points or data about the cards as well as part of that. But, if you look at like, I should have had a card that I could hold up, like Thok. I shouldn't use Thok. It's easy to misspeak. Let's go with Back Fist Strike, right? Legacy deals a target 4 damage. That card's effect is like a couple lines of code that say, to do this thing. So that's part of what you need to do to make that card, is like the code that makes the card do what it does. And obviously some cards are more complicated than others. Then there's also resources, we can call them. That's like images, right? Card artwork, audio, like music for environments, or maybe special sound effects if cards need them, like only guys. Also Argent Adept, I guess, right? And then there's also text, which is like literally the card text, which isn't necessarily, the code is not necessarily related to that, but it's related, but it's not the same. And like multiverse, right? Like biotext and stuff like that. Other things like that. And these are sort of separate, but related. Oh, there's a quick question from Seamus Butler. Is there a library of card effects which modders will be able to add to? Yeah, so we'll get into that in a second, but there's actually like all of our cards that we've implemented, we have a library of functions that they access. So like you don't have to write everything about what Back Fist Strike does. It's like basically one line that says deal damage to a target, and with parameters that say it's 4 damage, it's melee damage. Here's the like, is there any restriction on what type of targets, right? Some cards say non-hero targets, some cards say something else. And so those it's like, that's a library of card effects. If you think about it that way, it's basically an API for the cards. So I think, so basically for the code, what we're looking at is essentially letting modders create cards the same way we do. So coded in C#, make a DLL that the game loads. So this is going to involve, basically, we'll be providing a Visual Studio template project. And Visual Studio is free, Community Edition, and on Mac it's called VS Code, I think. And so you can get that, and we'll be setting up like template projects, so you can basically download that and open it up and start working on your code in there, plus examples and stuff like that. That's going to allow you to work on your cards and everything the same way that we do, which is be able to program them and test them out, test and program outside of having Sentinels running. So like you can actually much quicker test your cards and make sure they're working right, and interactions with other cards, either with like a command line or unit tests. So you can get those working without having to like boot up the game, start a game, play it, and all that stuff, which is how we do it. At some point you do obviously go into the game and test it out in there, but the large portion of the work there is inside Visual Studio. And we've seen other games do this kind of thing as well, where you installing Visual Studio. Yeah, so basically you you build your code in the same way, and so that will give you access to the same library of functions that we use to build our cards. I think at this point, David or Jean-Marc, did you want to take a minute and show a bit of how that looks like for some of our cards, and to give people a taste of like what that looks like?
Do you want to go ahead, David? Are you ready with
All right.
that, or?
Yeah, I got some stuff for that.
Okay, you can share your screen, and I can have you up.
Let me see if I can get Skype to share. Alrighty, can you see?
It's loading. I see.
Alrighty, so which thing did you want me to focus on? I had a couple things up just in case. Just like what a card looks like?
Sure.
Alright, so let's go with an Argent Adept one. Polyphoric Flare deals himself 2 energy damage, and if he takes damage that way, you may use a power now. So basically what this is broken down into like a couple parts. As you can see here in the comments, we have the text of what the card says, and then we have it broken down into steps. There's deal damage here. So this character card, because this is Argent Adept's card, is dealing itself, this character card, 2 damage. It's of the energy type. And then there's this stored results thing that we can use to track the actual action, because the game is broken down into these actions that happen, like a deal damage action of 2 from Argent Adept to Argent Adept. So then we can say, did the damage take, like, did the intended target take the damage? We look at the stored results. It'll say, did this character card take the damage? So was there an action? Did the action deal damage? Is the target the intended target? And if all of those things are true, then you may use a power. So then the person who, we have this concept of turn takers for the like Argent Adept has one, because that is the person playing Argent Adept. So that person who owns this card can select and use a power. And that's one of our many things that exist in our library of functions to actually do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. So looking at this, I mean, there's a bit of boilerplate, but there's like basically 3 lines of code that are actually doing stuff, I think, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. This is the boilerplate. This allows the coroutines that we use to run. But there's functionally 3 lines. There's deal damage. Did you deal damage to this guy? Then use a power.
Cool.
Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know, boilerplate is just like, it's just something you can copy and paste whenever it's needed. It might be like, okay, what's the coroutines? What does yield return? You in this case, for this particular code, you don't even need to know what that means. All you need to know is like copy and paste it.
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to, part of the project is like documentation and like explaining like, why is this stuff in here and why is that needed? And we're also going to be looking at streamlining that maybe, so there's a little less boilerplate, but just basically due to how the game works. And actually, I think we did a dev stream where we talked about all this, but we use coroutines that sort of allow us to combine the logic, what the cards are doing, and integrate with responses from the player sort of in one line, like in a sort of synchronous way. That is really necessary for how Sentinels works. It just makes the code a little ugly and a little awkward, right? Like most things that deal damage would like return a result as like a function call, right? But you have to sort of pass in a container for it to return a result in instead. And Balawi, I think part of the project is also going to be like, I think like that deal damage call might have some documentation, but it doesn't have like structured documentation that's like this is exactly what this parameter does. This is what this parameter does, and that's something that's part of this project is like making that documentation structured so you can actually like see your tooltips and everything like that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it shares the tooltips, but like
Yep.
the fields are named pretty descriptively, like what damage type is it, but also there's documentation inside of it that goes through the steps, and part of, as John said, part of doing this is moving that into the structured documentation.
Yeah. So yeah. So then we'll both have like a documentation like I don't know generated PDF or website or whatever that actually says what this function does and what all the parameters do. But then inside your Visual Studio, you can like hover over it like we were doing now, but like actually it shows more human documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So because you won't have access to like our code inside the engine, so we want to make sure that's exposed in documentation really thoroughly, or at least reasonably thoroughly.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, did you want me to go into like deck lists and stuff? Or
Yeah,
were we
sure. I
saving
think
that?
that makes sense to show that as well.
All right. So, at the bottom level of the game, there is the definition, which is basically like what is immutable, what is the same everywhere for this deck. And I have Baron Blade's deck list pulled up. And it's a JSON file. And if you were making your own deck, you would use this style, this format, and basically just change all the values. But like, so the deck name is it's Baron Blade's deck. What kind is it? It's a villain deck. What cards start and play Baron Blade character? For like the Sentinels, for example, it would be like Sentinels instructions and all the Sentinels, or and there's stuff like that. But then it lists all the cards in the deck, and each card has a definition as well. So like Baron Blade character, how many of them are in the deck? There's one. And then there's all sorts of information that's useful and important to the card in here. So like we use icons to show like a shorthand.
Yeah, I guess that's something I didn't even think
recognize.
about. Like, we need a list of like all the icons and what their identifiers are and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we have that, but we just sort of know it. It's one of those things.
Like what keywords appear on the card. So like ongoing or equipment. If you wanted to make your own keywords, you would just put in a word. It's just a string, and then any cards you make would know to reference. Like, oh, well, this is like this has the construct keyword, so constructs interactions happen there. All the text of what appears on the card, like, does it have any advanced text? Like, does it have like hit points on its flip side? What about text on its like gameplay text on its flip side? All that stuff goes in here.
Yeah,
so
and
this
you can see there's
text.
a few like special codes in there. Like that little squiggle Baron Blade is like automatically replaced when the game reads that with like italicized version of his name, or like
or
H is
if
one.
it's a hero, it might be replaced with guys.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it could replace it with guys.
So like little shortcuts for text replacement. Well, so like that's the character card. There's opening lines here because start of every game there's he has something to say.
That's true, and so can your modded decks have opening lines against. You could make them be unique, and you can see you can actually have unique text against specific characters. So you could actually have your character say something specifically to every other character if you wanted.
Yeah, if you Oblivion's opening lines is massive.
Yeah, it's one for every
variant. But yeah, like you'll see that that's the character card, but there's also like all the other cards in here too. Backlash Field, there's 2 copies of it, and stuff and such. Flavor quotes, all that. So yeah, this is sort of what the cards will look like at the lowest level. the game reads this and then constructs what you see when you
Mhm.
look at the card, and your code just puts some meaning to those words, basically.
Yeah, and the base game rules like know what an ongoing card is or like what a one shot card is and how those work in the
Mm-hmm.
game rules. But like the actual body of the card, that's what's controlled in the code of that specific card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the actual text that says the first time Baron Blade is dealt damage, like and all that stuff, that's exclusively so that the person playing the game who looks at the card knows what it does. It doesn't actually tell the
Right.
computer at all what to do.
Yeah, and same thing like the flavor text. That's 100% just for the interface. The engine doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really care about it.
So like, but if you were to add like a one-shot keyword here, the game would know. The game knows how to interact with one-shots. It says, "Oh, one-shots do their thing and then are discarded."
Yeah, or if a
So
card
that
has
was,
hit points, it's a target, and I know how to deal with that. Like
yeah,
your own
like
code
Blade
doesn't have to
Battalion
do
with
anything about that. Yeah.
We had a question in
hit
the chat.
points.
Who writes the opening lines? And I believe Christopher writes. Is that correct?
Yes. Christopher
Christopher and Braithwaite.
yeah, Chris, Christopher and Chris write them. I think Braithwaite did a lot of them for season 2, as Christopher was very busy, and there were very many.
There were a lot.
Cool. I suppose someone could make a card that like looks at the flavor text of other cards and has logic based on that, right? Because it's accessible in the code. So you
Yeah.
could be like, if play a one shot that's like destroy any cards that mention legacy in their flavor text or something like that.
There, there's there's the classic like Magic the Gathering example where like the flavor text becomes game text.
Oh my goodness.
Like
This is not
and
this
the
is not good. It's like next level
well,
guys
you can
card.
yeah, you can make a deck like that though, where it has this text that only becomes available.
I could see that being a guys variant with like
Yeah.
for like basically like any cards like referencing like I don't know like you get damage reduction based on the number of cards that have a certain character in them or something like that, or the number of exclamation points in the flavor text increase your damage by that amount.
So, but I think that pretty well covers the deck list. Do you want me to talk about triggers too, potentially, or?
Sure, if you want to briefly cover that.
Yeah. So, as we looked over here in Polyphoric Flare, you'll notice that this is the play function. We're overriding. So, like cards have a play function, and when they are played, they do that. Where other cards would have like a use power function if they have a power on them. But they also have triggers, and triggers are the meat of what happens with cards usually. They create sort of a passive check and effect. So like we have a library of helpers here to help
Right,
with
so this is
as well.
inspiring presence.
Yep. So increased damage dealt by hero targets by 1. So we have this increased damage trigger, and the criteria here is we look at the damage. Is it a hero? Then we want to increase it by 1. But if you go like a layer down, you can create. Oh, maybe this is not the best example. I will look at.
I mean, you can.
Something
There's
else.
helpers to do it easily, but you can make like.
Yeah.
You can say, whenever
Here we
this
go.
thing
This
happens,
is what I'm looking.
run this method, right?
Yeah. So the reduce damage trigger. If I can get to the bottom of it. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. Add trigger. There's this add trigger function, and you can say what sort of action do you want it to trigger off of, and you can give it criteria for that action. So like here, this is actually something that I fixed recently. For redirects, it looks at is it targeting the same target? Because you're not allowed to redirect damage to a target that it's going to. So it's like, okay, well, never redirect damage if it would go to itself. And then also respect battle zone. So like this is the sort of thing that you could put into a generic trigger.
Yeah.
Like add trigger, draw card. Whenever I draw a card that isn't ongoing, do a thing.
Right. Yeah, and you can use the helpers for like the common effects like increase damage by 1 or whatever, but you can also say like here is my like I have a function that I want you to call when this happens, and then do arbitrary things. And a lot of the things like scions or villains, like they have triggers like that because like they do complicated things when something happens.
Mm-hmm. So, but for like lots of the basic stuff, you have these things.
Mm-hmm.
Just increase damage trigger.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I think that's most of what I have.
Okay. Very good. Did you have anything more to add to that, Jean-Marc? David was probably focusing on the engine stuff.
I mean, there's lots to say about it, but I don't know that there's anything I need to say right at this moment. So
sure. So yeah, that's kind of just a quick overview of like what making your own cards, like from the coding perspective, would look like. And so obviously we'll be getting well into more examples and all that once as we go along through the project. But just wanted to give people an overview of that from the engine dev perspective. So thanks, David.
Yeah, I mean, one of our goals with this is, even though it does involve code and stuff, and I know that can be really intimidating for people, especially if they've, never coded before or whatever, is to really try and make it as straightforward as possible. Like, make it helpful, have some tutorials, show step by step, give sample code. Like, I don't know that we can completely eliminate code, but for those who are a little intimidated by it but have lots of really good ideas, we don't want the fact that it involves programming to be something that gets in your way. As much as we can.
That's definitely part of this project. Is part of the support is like helping people, giving them a lot of tools to work with and to get started with without being sort of like, how do I start? Like actually, when I was doing research, like a lot of modded games, it's like, how do I start making a Slay the Spire mod? It's like crickets, right? Like, but then other games like RimWorld is like, there are huge wikis and forums and stuff where people are helping out with that. And maybe that exists for Slay the Spire, but I haven't found it. So we want to make it easy to get into and get going with it. And actually, one thing I wanted to mention there is with this concept of tools and support mods, like that can be something that someone can make a mod that makes it easier to make mods, right? Like that is totally a thing. So we're happy to work with that too. Cool. So
before we move on, there was one question that I saw much earlier, about how to add mechanics like Night Mist's magic numbers. Like if you wanted to do something like that, you would just add it to the deck list, basically. Right. Like in that card description with like the hit points and such. So like, yeah, if you the sky's the limit. If you're like, oh, I want like some special marker on the card, then that's absolutely doable within what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think that's something I think that will come up throughout is like, right now there's like Night Mist magic number is like a special field in the deck list. So you could add your own special field, but we also need to make a way for your code to be able to get at that number and use it. And also be able to show it in the interface. So there's a few sort of elements to that, but that's definitely something that we'll want to look at. There's certainly like a lot of generic support already for things like what we call token pools, because like Setback has an unlucky tokens, and there's the Bloodsworn Coliseum, and like there's tokens on Scions and Oblivion and stuff. So there's actually pretty good support for just like this card has a number on it, and maybe the number could change. And so those are things that it's built in already. And I think that'll cover most things, hopefully. If it doesn't, we'll see what we can do to extend things. There's also a question from Licky00. I've seen decks that have cards that start outside of the game and have villain targets in the deck that need to be gained to kill them, or kill to gain them. That seems like something that you could do. I could imagine you'd like just have like there are different locations that are set up in the way the game works. Like there's the deck and there's the play area and there's the trash, but there's also like off to the side. There's out of the game, there's revealed area, and you could probably just dynamically create a new location at runtime if you needed to. So yeah, there's different ways you could do that sort of thing.
Yeah, like have Prize Master with a trigger. When Prize Master dies, grab prize and then give it to that person.
Right. Cauldron's Drift has a track that has tokens that move around on it. Where you could do that. Probably that would be like a special card, like the Bloodsworn Coliseum card, the crowd's favor, that has like it has 2 token pools on it, and so like you could have multiple token pools if you needed to indicate where the thing is, or like the Harpy.
Like Harpy, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Harpy has 2 token pools, and they just move between them.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you basically just have like, if it boils down to just numbers that are changing in some way, which a lot of things can be just boiled down to that, even if it looks different, like you can basically like implement the logic as numbers moving around and then or changing, and then display it sort of however. So it's kind of how things work. I mean, everything is a spreadsheet at the end, right? Oh, another question from Seamus Butler. I have a set of decks with a deck building aspect. You have a base deck and choose other parts of the deck from a pool. Could that be done?
Yeah.
I think so.
If you had the things that you were picking from set off to the side by default, like skyscrapers.
Yeah, then you would just have like pop up like select card decisions at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And then move them to your hand or wherever. So it could be complicated. You'd probably want to like make a mod that has that first and then use that mod. But yeah. Yeah, you can compare values because you got fully coding Nerve with a pencil, so you can do whatever you want if you can program it. Deck building would be on the choose character screen. Well, that's different, so I don't know. Maybe not.
There's no support for anything like that yet.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, you could do it at the start of the game. All the stuff that we showed there is like once the game is happening, like you're in the game screen. We're not necessarily looking. That would be more under the UI changes kind of thing, which is not impossible, but it's not something we're going to focus on supporting initially. So we're more focused on new content within the game. But that's a good question.
Yeah, doing it at the start of the game, I think, would actually make it viable because there's lots of support for that already. There are villains who have you make decisions at the very start of the game in some cases.
Right.
Like Greaser, if there's a tie for the highest HP.
Yep. Cool. Or Challenge Bugbear, for example. Cool. Okay. So yeah, that's just talking about the code aspect of it and a look at what that's going to involve. And sort of what actually I'm going to be working on after this call is like, how do we get that DLL into the game and get the game to actually load it? So that's some of the prototyping that I'm going to be looking at from our side, because that's, from that balance I talked about, balance between our work to support it and work from mod authors. Part of that balance is, we need to be able to load that code in. Will there be support for creating completely different game modes? I mean, maybe. I don't. That's well down the road, I think. But you mean like Vengeance mode and Oblivion mode versus Classic mode type of thing, or something else? Frenzied Havoc. While we wait for that follow up. Oh, you got something, David?
Oh, I was gonna say that you can create cards like the first battle zone card, second battle zone card that just have rules that functionally create new modes. You can put turn
Right.
takers in whatever order you want. There's plenty of room for functionally creating new modes without actually programming a whole new mode.
That's true. You could potentially have like different orders of things or whatever. But yeah, gauntlet mode or like things that are like outside of one game are more complicated, right? Because that falls under like house rules and UI changes that are more about like how does the video game work outside of the actual Sentinels game as well as inside the Sentinels game. So like that's like a lot bigger than just like we want to make a new deck. And I mean that's something that when we added team villain mode and Oblivion mode to the game, like that, just having those modes be a thing was a lot, and it's a lot more than just adding one new cards or decks. So that's not going to be our focus initially, but certainly potentially down the road, like being able to support having different ways to start the game and then having a deck like control a bit more of like how the game rules work is certainly possible. You're wondering about artwork. Well, that's good because that's the next thing we're talking about. Hey, Jennifer.
Hello.
So there's a lot of images that happen in Sentinels, and you've probably made a few.
Maybe a few. Maybe a few.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think probably most people haven't really thought about is when you're making stuff in Sentinels, like what are all the images that would be needed and where do they all go and everything with a mod, and could you show us some of that?
I sure could. Did I share my screen?
Let's see.
Let's see if look at that. It wants. I guess I'll show everything because I have multiple
yeah, if you have multiple
open.
programs going.
Yeah, so I have. I'll start with mini pack 2. Is that showing up for you?
Yeah.
All
I
right,
see
cool. So I thought I'd like go through and show like all the different art for the scholar that goes into the game. So so when you're playing the game, there's 6 images for for the average hero. Minimal. There's a minimum of 6 images, which would be the hero turn image, the villain turn image, the hero turn damage, the villain turn damage, and then when they're incapacitated during the hero turn or the villain turn. And those are actually 2 different images, because sometimes we need to adjust the like placement of them for like the villain turn versus the hero turn. And then if there's like glow effects, those are a separate layer too. So you can see for the scholar, he has his hero turn image, the damaged hero turn image, and then the effects layers for those, and then incapacitated, and then the same thing for the villain turn. So there's 12 images just for the the base scholar in game, and then another 12 or
right, that's his variant.
10 for his variant. But that's not all of the images that go in for the heroes. There's also the start of game image with the effects layer, and then for the yes/no dialogue, it's a different image, and you can see on the right side it's showing like a preview. Like the placement is different for each one, and the reason for like the yes/no dialogue that you'll see, like the scholar looks really tiny, and you think, why is he so tiny? Well, it's because we're using the same size space for some of the larger heroes, like Fnatic has like big wings that open, so there needs to be room for that, or Bunker is a much bigger character.
Right.
And then there's also
I guess one thing to mention is these are all like from the same image. Like there's an original art that has the scholar and then sort of different crops or placements of them. Not all of them, but like this one versus the start of game or whatever, right? They're often based on the same image. So it's more like processing one.
Yeah, and actually I actually was going to talk about that, but I'll put
Okay,
it for
sorry.
now. I have this Photoshop file that's like over 2 gigabytes, and I have like you can see all. Yeah, and when I first started, I used to have 2 separate ones, one for like the hero turns and one for the villain turns, and then like ended up for the later heroes, I put them all in here. But like you can see, like this is the villain turn scholar image, and like you can see there's like then the effects layer is separate, and then and there's like these guidelines in here, in kind of which kind of give a general idea of where the characters are placed, and I kind of got used to knowing where to put them, so they show up right in the game from doing it so many times. But yeah, you can see, like I'll pull up a newer character like Luminary is a good example. So like on the villain turns, they're usually like facing forward and like maybe looking towards the left, and then like on the hero turn, they're like slightly further to the side, and looking over. But like some of the heroes are really different kinds of poses. Like I know, like when you look at like Tachyon, she's like crouched down, and and Bunker is huge, and so there's a lot of different things. But
or Skyscraper, she's all special.
or Skyscraper, oh, she's in here too somewhere. We've got all of them are in here somewhere. Where is Skyscraper? Where are you, Skyscraper?
She's so tiny you can't see.
I know, this is like tiny Skyscrapers hiding. Oh man.
Yeah, so I just thinking about this, it's probably something we're gonna want to do is like create like a visual guide for like, all right, so you have like this full pose image of your character. Here are the kind of crops that you might want to think about, and guidelines for all those sorts of things.
I think Skyscraper might actually be in a separate file because she was really unique. Anyway, so but yeah, that's what I want to show. Like there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. And then there's also the ending images for the heroes, which actually are not in the DLC. They're in the main game, aren't they? They're in the core Sentinels project.
Right, that little because they're just like
atlas?
They're a little atlas of stuff. Yeah, but they're another crop of the same art, I think.
Yeah, it'll be another crop of the same art, but it's arranged slightly differently. And then there's also the actual card art images that go in for all the different cards in their deck, and there's the large card images, and there's also the small card images that are slightly different crops, but
and micro for phone size ones sometimes.
yes there are. And then while we're talking about phone, there's also like there's like a different crop for the phone version of the villains, because of the way the phone UI is laid out. But
I guess that's something we might want to like. That's interesting because like the mods won't be available on phones right away, right? And so it's like probably that's something that would be like if and when we get to like taking a mod to phone, it's like, all right, for this mod that's doing that needs to have these new crops, but it wouldn't need it otherwise.
Yeah, and since I know that there will be a question about it, even if it hasn't been asked yet, this is that's mini pick one. Guys has a lot of different images. This is now, to be fair, there's multiple variants of Guys in here, but if we look at just the Guys character without without the variants. He has.
Yeah, because he has like 6 different things he can randomly choose between and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's like 22 images just for core guys, without getting into like the special things with guys. So there's because he does a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And most of the guys' images don't even have an effects layer either. And there's that many. So like it's something to think about for those of you out there that are thinking about the guys' variants that you want to make.
Yeah, if you want to make a guy's variant, there's more to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors with that. So um, yeah, so that's guys. And then right, so then there's the villains, which there's the the in-game villain images. Then there's the start of game villain images with their effects layers, and then the end of game villains, and
Right, they have
there's
unique
like
end of game.
What?
They have unique end game images, unlike the heroes.
Yes,
I think,
they
right?
do, and they're different if they win or lose. Which and then they obviously have their card art images as well. But and then there's environments, and I think Final Wasteland is a good example. So there's there's 13 images for in-game, because there has to be a space for, like, if you're playing in like villain team mode with Oblivion, right? You could have like 10 different characters on the screen plus the environment plus there's a lot of places that the images will go in the game, and then there's different ending images for the environments. And for the Final Wasteland, there's like the regular ending image, and then there's like 2 different variant endings depending on and those have effects layers also. And I guess I'll mention, like, if the effects, it's just the same is the name of the image, then with the word effects at the end. Sure it goes. And then there's also, I guess the start of, right. One of the environment images will also be the start of game image, and like it'll start at the end. So it's 12 in game and then 1 start. So
yeah, and we create those environments out of, like, Jennifer will create a actual 3D world in Unity and then take screen captures. But you could do that as well, or you could just like draw unique backgrounds too. So, or take photographs and process them or something, or different things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're modding it, it can be really a lot of different things. And I think, that was like the super quick like run through, like, here's what images look like.
Right. Seamus Butler asks, what format does the art have to be in? I think it kind of depends on which file you are looking at, right?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I think they're all like JPEGs and PNGs. Obviously, like, if you need to have transparency for most of them, so PNGs are kind of the default, I think. Although environments are, sometimes JPEGs, but certainly an effects layer would have to be a PNG.
Yeah, with any transparency, it needs PNG, and I think if it's not transparent, it can be a JPEG, just depending on just make sure it's not compressed too much.
Yeah, that's also true. And in terms of resolution, it depends. And Unity like does a pretty good job of compressing stuff, but
yeah, and actually that's kind of a little bit one thing that we'll be looking at is like figuring out how the mod authors will have to package their images up, and that's not totally finalized, but obviously we're at the start, so nothing is finalized. But like we've been thinking about, like, should we have people like create their put their assets into Unity and generate a bundle out of there, or like be able to load them without doing that and things like that. So that's something we're looking at and probably prototyping. We're right now remote error not looking at Unity being necessary for modding. It's possible that it might be, but it is free, so it's not a huge hurdle, I don't think, if it does end up being required, and we would provide templates and stuff. So, Omnitron.
Omnitron. I don't know. Thought I'd pull up Omnitron.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, if I look at these in the like some of these, because I know like a lot, like I know I saved them out at like 4096 by 4096, but yeah, I guess I shrunk these down to 2048. And then like they get crunched down to 1024 in Unity to
Yeah, and in any case,
keep the
like,
file sizes down, because one thing to keep in mind is if it's a really high resolution, that's going to be a much bigger file size, and when you multiply it by 100, it's going to add a lot of
like doubling the resolution of an image actually multiplies it by 4, right? Because you're doubling it in 2 dimensions. Cool. So yeah, so one thing, that's one thing we're going to be looking at in these early stages is sort of how do the files get brought in. Like we actually already have internal documentation of like, you need these images named this and this, and they are these sizes and so on. And that's something we'll be cleaning up and making available. But like, is it like a folder structure that you just sort of include in the zip file, or do you go into Unity and like build the thing? Like this is like what we do for expansions, right? Like this is literally the project that Jennifer has opened for Mini Pack 3. We can like build that, and it makes a file that the game loads, which is like, oh yeah, more guys stuff. Oh, this text bubbles.
Look at these atlases.
Yeah, so Sprite Atlases, that's a thing that is necessary.
Okay, I guess these are because Guys has special.
Oh, Guys is special.
Also.
Yeah, he has an atlas in here of his ending images because they need to be transparent, I think.
Yeah, because there's, and I mean they're really just the his in-game ones, but they're there's so many that Guys is special.
Cool. So yeah, so that's something that's still a bit open in terms of like exactly how that's going to be packaged up for mods. But this, I mean, the graphics that are going to be necessary for a fully implemented mod, it's going to be the same whether it's in packaged up in Unity or packaged up in a zip or whatever. So something to keep in mind as like this is going to be this kind of scope of what you're looking at in terms of like, it's not just card art, it's also all the character art and things like that.
Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about foils until I saw the atlas just now.
Right.
Foils are also special.
Yeah, so foils have both the regular artwork, but also as another layer that controls how shiny it is.
Yeah, and they have like a special shader in the game that like knows how to read the images.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, all foil all the time for your mods.
Yes, all of them. All right, is there any major thing I'm forgetting, John?
Yeah, I think that probably covers it. Yeah, how about sound? Well,
yeah,
it's good you brought that up, JZC.
Yeah, I mean, there's this music folder right here.
Yeah. Is there anyone on the call that would like to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, sound is almost certainly easier in terms of implementation than the graphics, because when you play in an environment, each environment has an identifier, which is basically the name of the environment without spaces. And then it just looks up, do I have a matching file to this? And if it does, that's the one it plays, and it just plays it on loop. Unlike Spirit Island, which has a bunch of dynamic stuff going on, Sentinels is pretty basic in its music playing. It's just like find the file, loop it, done. Now, we do have to do some stuff in Unity to add that, so we're going to have to find a workaround to that, but I'm sure we can figure that out. And then, so that's for like an environment. And what we'll probably do is if you don't provide a file, you can either choose one of the existing music files that are already in the game. You know, if you're making another urban area and you just want to use Megalopolis music, that's fine. If but or you can provide your own, and then we might have uh, just some default music if you haven't selected anything that's super generic and just kind of works in any situation in which there's some action going on.
Guys.
Very generic music of guys singing. um, and yeah, and as John mentioned earlier, we can provide some resources of like, just go here and you can get some free royalty music or public domain music or whatever that you're allowed to put in there. So I think that covers most of what would be going on with environment music. For villain, it's pretty similar. It just after you're done, it checks the villain's identifier, checks for endgame dash that villain's identifier, and if it exists, it'll play it. And then there's some special ones for like special lose-win conditions in environments or whatever. And again, it just loops it. The most complicated one would be team villains. As I think anyone would know if they have been around for a while, that the team villains is very different in that each team villain has four different stems each, and it mixes those together on the fly based on the team composition and the turn order. That's more complicated because then you can't just put in anything you want. It has to fit or it'll just sound like a mess, which I guess if you want a mess, that'll be fine. But
Major Master Team Villain.
Yeah, if you want it to sound coherent, that's going to be a bit more work on my side to prepare something to allow that to be not a major deal. And it'll be more work on the other person's side to actually replace it with the things they want. But again, we will have some sort of default, like if you have nothing loaded, it will just play this.
The generic villain song.
Like, yeah, exactly. You're not. Basically, we want to make it so that if you don't have anything on hand, that's fine. The game will still make it sound okay. And there are some ways in some parts in the game that we have special sound effects, particularly for guys and the Argent Adept, and even in like the Bloodsworn Coliseum with the crowds and stuff like that. Again, we have something in Unity that takes care of those things right now, but we'll have to talk and figure out like if we want to make it easy to just basically drop files in, and it kind of knows what to do with it. So one example you might think of for that is, let's say whenever you use a power, it can check in a folder to see, is there a file called use power dash and then the name of the identifier of the card. And if there is, it'll play it. And if there isn't, it just goes on without it, which is what happens most of the time anyway. So we'll have to talk about things like that. But I don't foresee it being terribly complicated with the exception of the team villains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we sort of, we do that kind of thing already with like Argent Adept and Guys, and even Guys has like, he has a probability of playing a sound for a lot of his things, so he doesn't always play it, but like there's a chance it'll play, and that's certainly something we could potentially extend to be like always available for cards. Or if your card like says that it does that, then it can use it potentially. Seamus Butler wants to pay you to make Team Villain music for him. That's probably okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to rule it out, but I'll want to talk to the team about that.
Yeah. Maybe that's our new business model is just, we'll make mods for everyone. I don't know. Wait, that's just making games.
Yeah. Yeah, this is quickly turned around. Everyone's just like, okay, here's, X amount of dollars, make this mod for me. Okay, thanks.
It's like, wait a minute. Cool. So, and then text. I mean, text is text. I don't think we need to. Do we have a writer in the room? I don't think so. Write the text down into a text file and put it in the right place. So yeah. I just want to note down here, like, organization prep of files could be either, specific folder, structure, etc. And we load the files at runtime. This option is like harder for us because like you need to be like compress the textures and make sprite atlases ? Like there's things that like are more complicated for us as the game developers if it's just like a bunch of files in a folder. Because as you saw with Jennifer's sharing there, like with a Unity project, basically it like does the compression and organizes the files so the game can like load them very easily. There's no like extra steps. And so this is like basically requiring a bunch of extra steps for us, but it makes it much easier for people to do. So that's a balance there. The other option is sort of like mod authors make a Unity asset bundle, which is basically like you make a file like we already do for the mini packs and the Rook City and whatever, which is a bit more on the mod authors, but it's not a ton. But there's some other complicated things to do with that. With like there's some assets we use for things that might have to be included in there, and I don't know if we can do that copyright wise and stuff, so potentially complicated as well. So those are things that we're going to be getting into over the following weeks as we're in the dev streams. Like, how do we load these resources up in a good way, and what's the best approach for that? And it might go back and forth, and maybe it's going to be sort of a combination. Unity is free, so it's not like, I don't think, the worst for people to have Unity to make a mod, but I don't think that's our preference, because it's certainly probably more of a burden than we want people to have if possible, but we'll see. We're not going to rule it out, and it could end up at some point being both things are supported at some point, but we'll probably pick one or the other to begin with. All right. Oh, and as I also mentioned, I think earlier, and there was a question just at the start of this section, was about like, what if I just have ideas for cards and I can program them, but I don't have any art, I don't have any music. What would I do then? And we want to have, at least be able to provide like some directory like of resources, like, or pointers to like, here, you can go to this website. They've got tons of royalty free music that you can use. Here's and public domain or Creative Commons or whatever it is that is legal and good to use. And the same thing for art. Is there some Creative Commons artwork libraries out there that are comics related or non-comics related or whatever? Maybe you can like mash some stuff together from those things, clip art or whatever, to at least have something that isn't just like blank images or stick figures. And yeah, I mean, DeviantArt, not all DeviantArt is just free to copy, so don't assume DeviantArt, but there's certainly Creative Commons stuff there too. And you'll want to make sure to credit your stuff and everything properly. But yeah, and I mean, directory of people who will do commissions for your mods, right? Like you were saying, can I pay Jean-Marc? You can pay Adam to make art for you. Adam takes commissions. So there's certainly potentially an option, of having a directory of artists who would be up for making stuff for your mod. Probably for money, but maybe you have a friend who wants to do it and be part of your project. So lots of ideas there. So let's get a note here, like maintain a directory of resources for art/music, Creative Commons / public domain, royalty free, commissions, etc. Yeah, you can ask permission, and that's a thing too. So for art that's on the internet, but talk to the artist and work something out. So there's lots of potential there. We certainly are going to want to avoid people just screenshotting other games and putting them in as card art or something like that. Like that's not going to be cool. So you gotta make sure you're above board. All right, so that's the resources. Anything else anyone want to talk about that? I know that was a lot. All right. Oh yeah, documentation. That's a thing. We sort of talked about documentation throughout all of this, but that's for us as from the balance side, that's a really important thing for us to create documentation for the code, for the low level JSON files David was showing, for how the images work, how the audio works, where the files all go and everything. The more we can do on that, the easier it is for people to make mods. And to me, that's a big part of the project, because we could, build in mod loading and have it all there and have no documentation, and it's a mystery to anyone, right? Who wants to make a mod? We want to encourage people to make mods, so we want to make it easy for people to do that. So we want to be documenting all of these things above, as well as how do I get it onto Steam Workshop and everything like that. So definitely something that is going to be part of the project. Oh yeah, and I also, another thing that might happen at some point is a dev console. So this is press a button in game to get a text entry to do things, to do mysterious dev things, play any card, stack a deck, deal any damage, all sorts of this, whatever the game can do, just make it happen. This is probably harder in Sentinels than it is in our other games, I think, David and Jean-Marc, but maybe we can still do it.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's something people have on and off been requesting, even for beta testing, since the dawn of the game. So
yeah, just the way Sentinels works is Sentinels is a linear thing that goes from decision to decision to decision to decision. So at any point in Sentinels where it stops, it's waiting for you to choose what card to play, or what power to use, or what target to damage, or things like that. And so there's not really an opportunity, except at specific times, for other things to happen besides what's happening right now. Compared to Spirit Island, where it's just there's a bunch of things you could do, and I'm just waiting for you to do one of these things, so other things can happen anytime.
There are two related questions in the chat that we might want to address. Balui asked, would a story mode type mod be possible? And Seamus Butler asked, could we make weekly one-shots for mods?
Yeah, so the story mode idea, I think, kind of goes back to sort of bigger ideas, around UI mods, or things that are outside of the game. So I think possible maybe in the future. I mean, not everything is possible because programming is magic, and you can do anything. But in terms of like the things that we're going to be focusing on helping mod authors to create, it's going to be outside of the scope of that, at least initially, if that makes sense. But if you really want that and want to go bushwhacking in the woods, like, you can. It's just going to be not something we're going to be able to support directly for a while. And weekly one-shots, that is an interesting idea. There's no probable reason why, like, assuming mods exist and are supported, that the weekly one-shot couldn't say this character is in, like, I could, say this weekly one-shot requires this villain that's a mod villain. The problem with that is that, like, mobile players wouldn't be able to play it. So I think it's not something that I would expect to see until we have, like, official DLC mods, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that they were trying to ask if they could have, like, make their own, like, back issue type thing, quote unquote.
I'm not sure what that means.
Or, like, they could create the equivalent of a weekly one shot, like, that is not actually hooked up to the system, just something they could load up and play.
Oh,
like a stacked game.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of related to the dev console thing. Or this could be, I guess it could be sort of like pre-game setup.
Yeah. My imagining of it would be that they go to the one-shot menu and then there's some button at the top that says, like, mods or whatever. And then when you click on that, it shows one-shots that are specifically, like, have been specifically loaded in by the mods that you own.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, some people could make their own one-shot that just uses, the regular game's characters, but then they could also make them that includes their own characters.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that kind of sounds like a future feature sometime down the road and not really related to direct mod support. So maybe someday.
Right.
Cool. So, all right. So I think that kind of covers that stuff, just in terms of, like, what is this all about? And, like, as you can see, it's about a lot. And it's one of the reasons why, that was a stretch goal. And it's something that is, like, now that Sentinels Season 2 is complete, it's a new big project that we are going to start. And we're going to start development on it starting today. I'm not sure how much I'm going to actually get to today because it's already 5 o'clock here for me. But I probably will go for about an hour on it. So, and in case anyone didn't hear before, basically what we're going to be doing is working on this as sort of a side project that's going to be, at least initially, primarily me, because I'm going to be looking at prototyping, like, how do we load DLLs and how do we load all these resources and get them into the game, sort of at a technical level like that. And David and Jean-Marc will be coming in to look at, like, the engine needs to be able to, like, load these cards in. That's not we've talked about it. It's not like a huge amount of changes, but there's some changes there. And of course, the music stuff that Jean-Marc was talking about is going to be a factor. And the images, making sure that image documentation and guidelines for how to set up the images and creating example projects and stuff, Jennifer will be involved in as well. And there's going to be screens we have to create for mods. Like, I could keep talking about all the other work we need to do. But we're starting here. We're starting at, like, can we make a DLL that can load the game, that the game can load and, like, get a new card in or something like that. So will these mods be moderated at all? Yeah, I mean, Steam has its own sort of system. Actually, I didn't even talk about Steam Workshop specifically, but, like, Steam Workshop is basically a distribution mechanism for mods. And so, like, there'll be a utility or maybe in-game or something that lets you upload your mod to the Steam Workshop and then people can subscribe to it. And so there's like, I think Valve has like a bit of a review process, and we haven't like decided exactly like what our guidelines are going to be, but we're going to, you know, between us and Greater Than Games and the community, we'll come up with some guidelines that say like, you know, obviously like nothing that violates Steam's rules, like offensive content and stuff like that. But then like, what about like copyright issues? What about, you know, can you use the existing art from the game or change it? Like all these sorts of questions are things that'll come up down the road before we, you know, get to actually shipping the feature. In terms of shipping the feature, actually, we're going to be supper time.
All right.
Bye.
And we'll go out for lunch.
Hi,
And
Judah.
go to the library at my grandparents' house. And guess what? We'll watch a movie while eating supper. We're having pizza.
This is an excellent contribution.
Our trip tomorrow.
My son is very excited.
Yeah, I mean, I would be excited about
Yeah.
all that stuff too.
Yeah, that's all good
What
stuff.
do you call it?
I'm on a live stream right now. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna head off.
Yeah. No, I think we're pretty much wrapped up. So, yeah, enjoy your supper and your pizza and your big drive and all that stuff and your weekend.
We will.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Jean-Marc.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Excellent. You're getting the real experience with this dev stream. Everyone's, you know, got folks in their lives, and so that happens. But yeah,
Regular Handelabra meeting.
yeah, exactly. You know, sometimes Jeremy's cat like knocks over his computer while he's on the call and stuff or whatever. So yeah, just to get back to what I was saying, we're going to be like trying to, as well as, you know, having the development all open, we're going to plan to having like sort of public beta style stuff. So we can have, you know, a branch on Steam so people can start working on mods even while the support isn't finished, but sort of partially there. And, you know, really get people involved sort of from the ground, at the ground level is kind of the plan. So we'll see. That's kind of it's a little off the cuff, a little maybe more casual project, but it's that's how we're gonna roll with it and get where we want to go. And I think that's gonna be it for the meeting aspect for today, and it'll be into a little bit of prototyping work for me, unless there's anything you want to add, Jennifer or David.
It's just very excited to see people making stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll be
Really
surprised
content.
to see all the stuff that's going to be there.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. So I'm not leaving Lucky 00, so I can keep answering questions for a bit too. So, but I'll let Jennifer and David go, so you can get back to other things you're doing, which aren't this, but we'll have you back on at some point, I'm sure.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to be on a live stream and interact with the fans. And it's hard to believe it's six years since Sentinels came out. It's really
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's pretty great. So, all right. I guess I'm gonna head out. And bye, everybody. I'll hang out in the chat for a few minutes in case anyone has any questions.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah,
Bye.
same, probably. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right, so I'm going to stick around for a bit, but I'm just going to go use the washroom. So I'm going to do this. BRB. BRB. Be right back. actually not going to have headphones anymore because I'm by myself now. Let's see what chat's doing. People porting other people's custom content, Licky00, I would say definitely have their permission and credit them and everything. That's not something I would do without permission, though, right? That's going to be, once things actually start happening. But that's a good point. And remote air, yeah, list of recommended tools. It's probably, I think that goes along with like the recommended resources, maybe content creation tools like Manga Studio and stuff like that. All right, so I have some music on as well, just from Sentinels environments. Let me know if that seems too loud or not loud enough. And I'm just going to try to talk through things as I'm working, but kind of the idea, for these streams is just going to be like, John's working, and you can peek on him. And I'll try to, sort of speak out loud a bit and watch the chat. But it's mostly like, John's at work, and you have a camera. I actually don't usually listen to music either, so I might listen to the music sometimes, but I've just had the headphones on for like 3 hours now, so I'm good to take a break from that. All right. What are we doing? Normally I would have a Trello board. I think I'm going to set up a Trello board offline because there might be things on the Trello screen that I don't want everyone to see. So let's just set up a quick task list for right now. I'm only going to go for like an hour today, because it's already been like a long day of streaming and stuff. But so the main things we need to look at to begin with here, right, are like, we need to load a DLL at runtime that can see the engine stuff. So like be a subclass of card controller, access game controller. I mean, if it can be a card controller, it can do that. But basically, like, be able to do that within the Unity environment is an important thing. It needs to work on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And so, like, Unity needs to be able to see the code. The engine needs to be able to see the code. The other thing, potentially, if we go with the resource structure, so loading resources from disk, like textures plus compression, Sprite Atlases. So Sprite Atlases, if you're not familiar, Jennifer showed like the graphics. Like, if I type in Sprite Atlas, I probably find one, right? Okay. Let's open one. I'm going to focus on the other thing, but I just want to talk about this a bit because it might not be familiar to everyone. Basically, if you have a lot of little graphics, if you load them all separately, it uses up a lot of memory on your, in your program. And so what you can do is, instead of having lots of little graphics, combine them into one big graphic, and then have something that says, oh, the actual graphic is like at this rectangle within the big graphic. And then you can actually show that graphic show multiple things from that same graphic on the screen for very low memory and low performance impact. So like, and we use this for the cards primarily, but also for a few other things. Where's the Atlas folder? Right, so here's like Unity Atlas. I can just double click it, I guess. So like this the image is square, which is like important for graphics cards and compression algorithms stuff. Square graphics can be compressed better and they use up less memory than non-square graphics. And all these cards shapes are non-square, right? They're like these landscape or portrait rectangles. And so we pack them all into this one thing, and then there's, you know, code and data that says, you know, Bbot is at this spot and it's this big. And, you know, that's, and then this data here is actually able to like say, okay, these are the different graphics in that atlas. And so the game uses that in order to optimize displaying those things on the screen in a reasonable way. And so if you're creating your, if the mod gets created in Unity, then like that just gets done by the mod author as part of that. But if it's not, we need to like have all these files and like load them at runtime, make that big image and save it, and right, or maybe you make the Sprite Atlas image and you provide like a data file for us, but we basically need to be able to get it into our system in a way that makes sense. So that's kind of what's going on there. So that's a prototyping task that I want, you know, that sort of helps determine whether we should go with, you know, asset bundle, which is like Unity, or folder structure sort of resources. So that's kind of a secondary thing. So these are the kind of first two things that I want to focus on prototyping, because like if this part, I know this part can work, but I don't know how to do it, and I don't know exactly how to do it. I want to make sure we can do that, because if there's a technical reason why we can't do that, that has a huge impact on how we do the code part, right? We need to say like, okay, do we need to like support some scripting language, or do we need to like, I don't know, get people to like send us their code, and that won't work. So like we need to figure out how to make that work. So part of this kind of dev process is like, if you have questions about like how your approach is going to work, it makes sense to prototype something, and maybe the prototyping you do doesn't get used, right? Like maybe we look at like, can we load these users from disk, and we find out that like we tried a bunch of ways to prototype it and it turns out that's the bad way. So the work we did to do that, it just doesn't get used, but it's still valuable, right? Because it makes sure we don't spend a lot of time going down the wrong path. And I mean, if it turns out to be right, then maybe you do keep using that code, or you change it or whatever. So there's different outcomes, but the same sort of principle of prototyping. What is a DLL exactly? It is a dynamic link library. So you might notice most of my dev work is going to be in Safari, the browser. I guess DLL is the world's leading vendor finance partner. Okay. Actually, dynamic link library. So basically what a DLL is a bundle of code that's either compiled or like in sort of some portable language format, which is a .NET thing. It's a way to like take a bunch of your code and package it together in one file that's like able to just be loaded and executed by a program. So normally a program is like an exe or something, an exe on Windows. And the exe is like the main program, and it runs everything, but the DLL can be loaded dynamically at runtime. So you don't, your program doesn't need to know even that DLL exists, as long as it could know how to load it. But it's just like, I need to run this, I want to run this function, and you provide it the DLL and says, oh, it's in that DLL, I can run it from there. And so it actually goes into the DLL and runs the code in there, and then comes back to the main program. So that's actually how Sentinels works already. So that's actually a good thing to point out. So let's pull up actual Sentinels. Actual Sentinels. This is Sentinels in Unity. We're going to be in here a lot. We might actually not be in Unity. We're probably going to do this in a like more of a sample project because there's not any need to like be recompiling. It just takes longer to recompile the whole game every time. But so Sentinels has its own like lots of scripts that have to do with the user interface and multiplayer and everything like that. But it brings in these DLL files from the engine. Also, if my screen size is too small for the stream, let me know. I can readjust the resolution so it's easier to see. There's a balance that I'm willing to go there. If it's okay with everyone, I'll just keep it the way it is. But if everything is too tiny for you to see because it is a 5K screen that's getting scaled down onto the stream, I can make an adjustment. So we'll see. Okay, so this DLL engine common, that's like actually even more basic than Sentinel's engine, which is the code that has the code that you saw David show. Engine common is sort of like common routines and helper functions and things that we use in all of our games. So we call it a common engine because it's used by all the games, and we can update it and add features to it for everything. Whereas Sentinel's engine is the lower level code for just Sentinels. Yeah, so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna make a new Unity project just to like keep it clean. It doesn't really. I could do it in Sentinels, but it's like there's no need to have it in Sentinels right now. We can always make our prototype in something else, but it's gonna need to be in Unity. So let's make a new project, and we need to make it in the version of Unity that Sentinels is using. So Sentinels, as we talked about, is sort of stuck in the past a little bit. It's still on Unity 2017 LTS. Our newer games are in 2019, which isn't actually that old. Unity 2020 like just came out just now, basically. Well, like last month or something, or August. So our other games are up on a higher number, but Sentinels is a little bit in the past for various reasons. So our prototype is going to be in Unity 2017. Sure, 2D. So we'll call it mod prototype. Exciting. And I'll just put it in my projects folder. It's not like I could put it in Handelabra. Handelabra is like my Git folder, though. It's like where I have my actual Git repos. So let's put it in here. We're probably not going to worry about like versioning this thing because it's like a throwaway. And it's anything we do in it that we keep, we just bring into the actual Sentinels project and have versioning on it. Okay, so we're in mod prototype. Let's create just a script. And we'll just call it like mod loader. And open it up. So this, I'm not gonna like start writing code probably today. I might, I don't know. I need to like, I've done a little bit of research of like, how do you load a DLL at runtime? So the thing is like in Unity, if you have a DLL, and we're gonna like throw in the Sentinels DLLs actually too. So let's go to, let's grab the DLLs that are in here. Let's just copy that plugins folder. So when I have the DLL this way in Unity, like Unity imports it and has it available to my scripts right now, right? So let's make sure it compiles. So let's just make a new game object for that and add mod loader to it. And we're just gonna make mod loader like do stuff. A scene. We don't really need a scene, but we need it to be able to like press play and have stuff happen. So like we can write this code that says I exist, and in the start method, it's going to execute as soon as we start. So just some Unity basics here, really. But we added that to this game object. We don't have to call it mod loader, but we can just to make it more obvious. So when we run this scene, that code's going to run, right? I exist. It happened. And since we have our plugins, our DLLs are here, like Unity's going to know about them. I can say using Handelabra, Sentinels, engine, right? I can say new game with just legacy in it. And that's it. Oh, I need to do like this, right? Syntax. Like this is, if I don't have this engine DLL in here, I mean, if I can show, I can prove it to you by deleting it and editing it again, I guess. But like, the only reason I can use this, like the only reason that this namespace is visible here and that I can make an instance of this class and stuff is because I put this DLL here. So Unity indexes the DLL and it makes it available, right? And you can see we printed out like a bunch of debug stuff about like, oh look, there's the legacy ring and lead from the front and whatever, right? All that stuff is in the game. So that's all well and good. But what about Seamus Butler's DLL, right? I don't have that, right? I can't put in my code here using Seamus Butler's DLL because it doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't exist when I'm making Sentinels, right? Sentinels is out and it's published. What I do when I build a game is obviously more than just this, but like I'm building. We make a build. So this is actually, I mean, it's not. This is all not obvious, right? Let's just make a new folder called build, and we'll call it mod prototype. So once the game is built, it's like, whoop, sorry, that was probably really loud. I'm gesturing. Once the game is built, it's like, it's set, right? It can't be changed by anything I do back in here because it's been uploaded to Steam and then downloaded to your computer. Like I don't have any more input onto that. So there's no way that my code here can know about your mod's code directly because I just don't have it. And it doesn't make sense for me to be like, hey, everyone, send me your code and I'll include it in the next build of the game and then you can try to test it. And that's just not going to work. We need you to be able to do that. Like this needs to be able to load your DLL like when it's running, right? If we run this, oh yeah, this hilarious thing. Sure. So here's our, and we don't see anything actually happen there, but we can actually open a terminal window and we can see. I mean, we could literally have it show something on the screen, but you can see this is the same thing that got logged. This is a player log out of Unity, so it's like it said I exist, and it printed out the game that we made. So it's able to like obviously run the code that just like it did in the editor. If we actually pop into this, so if it was Windows, it would be like an exe file. I can do a Windows build if you want. I won't be able to run it, but I can see it. But all this stuff is just sort of arranged differently on Mac than Windows. But this is the actual executable file. Then under resources and data, you have like any fonts or graphics or whatever. You also have the DLLs that the game has. So some of them are like Unity's own DLLs. Assembly C# is the code that has like this mod loader mono behavior or any of the Unity level code for the game. And it also brings in the plugins, Sentinels Engine and Engine Common in there. And it is loading all these DLLs at runtime, right? This executable is actually using these DLLs. But because of the way that our environment is, we can actually make code that references things without having to like, I don't know, do weird things. It makes it easy for us. So what I want is to be able to say load a DLL file and instantiate a class that it has, right? That's sort of step one. Like, if I have a DLL file that has like my class, I want to be able to like go like our x equals new my namespace dot my class. Right now, it's like that's in red. There's no such thing, right? There's no such thing. You can't do that. So obviously, I can't just write it like this. I also want, like, in this class, I want it to be able to, like, know about Sentinel stuff. But that's later, right? The DLL should know about Sentinel stuff. That's, like, step 2. So, like, number 1. Number 2. And then, like, ... like, number 3, like, new game, my hero, or whatever, right? Like, be able to, like, actually have game be able to load these, load game be able to do these, to access these things. So that's kind of it works, right? As soon as you can do that, then you've got mods. You're cooking. So, but we need to do the first steps first. And that's when we look at what, like, I know things, but we also are going to have to look up things. Like, I know that .NET has reflection. I know that .NET has assembly loading and stuff like that. We don't do dynamic assembly loading in the engine. We do have reflection for loading, like, decks. Like, when I write this, what happens when I write this? This is actually kind of instructive, so I'm going to comment this out. So when I have this line, and this isn't just for you guys, this is like for me, like working through how everything works, could refresh myself on reflection and everything, so it's still valuable, not just for the dev stream. I would just do it in silence is the difference, really. So how does the game know when I say, like, I literally passed it a string, right? I didn't, and like in here, it's like there's like all this stuff. How did it get all that stuff from me just saying legacy string, right? Like that's not anything. How did they get all that? And it's like a few things. So let's go to actually the engine and look at what happens there. Okay, so let's close all that. Let's go into game.cs. So actually, and there's 2 levels actually. So game is one thing and game controller is another thing. So here's the constructor game that I'm calling. Takes turn taker identifiers. And actually this doesn't even get into reflection. Let's go back to the other solution. I wish Visual Studio made it easier to open multiple solutions. I think it can, but it's just like new instance. Yeah, new instance. All right, this one can be the engine. That one can be. Oh, I don't actually want to be in Sentinels. I want to be in mod prototype. I'm going to do that 100,000 times. We also have game controller, and that's in a different namespace. So we've talked about the model view controller architecture a bit before, but roughly the data structures of the game are and like the mechanics, like the low level data and everything is in game, in the model. The rules of the game, how the game works, what a card does, is all at the controller level. So when you're doing mod stuff, it's going to be mostly at the controller level when your card controllers and everything. Game controller, and we just literally just pass in the game. Game controller, and then we could actually, I don't know if you can actually print out game controller. Does it actually do anything? It might not, because it's like really not what you are interested in. But we can show, one thing I want us to see is like, it's creating a class. It's not just like, so the game is actually not actually doing anything exciting. Yeah, so it's printed a class. But what I want to do is print out something else, which is the first hero turn taker controller. Oh yeah, I need link. Link, it's the best. Language integrated natural queries is my favorite feature of C# and .NET. Mono or whatever. So, all right, it just says it's a hero turn taker, but it's actually, oh yeah, it is. It is just a hero turn taker controller. That is true. That is true. What I should be printing out is the card controllers. Yeah. Now I have. Sure. To recursive string? Yeah, that's just that. That's from the engine common. That like, if you print out like an enumerable in C#, it's like it prints out like, hey, it's an enumerable of this type. It's like, great. I want you actually to print the things that are inside of it. So there's a method we have for that. It's like, be more useful, please. ToString. Okay, so what does this print out? Legacy character card controller. Legacy backfist strike card controller. Right? All of these classes that came out of me literally just typing in legacy. So something happened there, and we can see what happened. It's exciting. So game, we'll talk about what game does. Game actually loads turn takers. Turn takers are heroes, villains, environments. Sometimes weird battle zones. I don't know, weird things. We get the definition for the deck. And the definition is basically a code-based representation of those JSON files, right? So let's pull up legacies here, right? Legacies character card, backfist strike, bolster allies, all the data about those cards. And the deck definition is a class that just maps directly to that, basically. Card definition maps directly to one of those card entries, right? It's loading the stuff from the JSON. And then above definition, you have the actual turn taker and the card, which is a class that is like an instance of that thing, right? So the turn taker exists as like a thing that can be changed. A card exists as a thing that can be moved around to different locations. Its hit points can change, things like that. So it has different properties that need to be saved, right? Hit points, maximum hit points, token pools, cards that are next to it, cards that are under it, cards that are below it. That's technically different. Those are things that have to be saved so that when you load the game, like say after you undo or after you continue the game, it has that information still. Versus the title of the card, you don't see that here, or the body text of the card. That is immutable. That never changes. So that is just in the definition. But then the behavior of the card is actually at a whole higher level. Card controller, and there is a base class for card controller. Where's my controller folder? Base class for card controller, just like what does every card has abilities to do and properties and everything. But each card itself is implemented as a subclass of this. So let's go into Legacy, go into our backfist strike. So let's look at all of this. The namespace actually has Legacy in it. It uses the model for, I don't even know why I actually use the model. But the card is actually, the name of this class is important. It has to match exactly the identifier of the card. So backfist strike, back-fist space strike, that's something we show on the screen, but that's not the identifier of the card. The identifier card is a unique string that is going to be used in more places than you would think. Like the art for the card, the code for the card, if there's a sound effect, if there's this and that, like especially character cards and whatever have, like you can see, these are also identifiers that are referring to other dexes identifiers and stuff. Nemesis icons are based on identifiers. This is something that's really important when you're trying to do principal programming, is you really want to avoid having display strings be important. You really want to have non-display strings, whether it's a number or a string or a GUID. That's the thing that identifies that the property that identifies the object is not something you need to worry about the user ever seeing. As a programmer or mod author, you're going to be seeing them, but that's not something that's ever going to show up on the screen, for example. But since the way we decided to set up Sentinels is these identifiers are going to be specifically, upper camel case, no numbers, coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, follow the rules of what class names are allowed to be in C#. And so this class name is based on the identifier, so we can actually use reflection to create an instance of this class. This class is actually not referenced anywhere in the code. If I load up, like, I just search for references, so I could search for reference to, like, the card class. It's a lot. 5,000 matches. A lot of stuff in the code refers to, these things that are classes that are used in the code. But nothing actually ever refers to Backfist Strike Card Controller, except its own constructor. Because, the rules of Sentinels, and the rule book of Sentinels is not going to mention Backfist Strike, except unless it's like an example card or something. Because the actual existence of the card is not important. And that's one of the things that makes mods a little easier, I think, in terms of how this is set up, because we're already set up to load these things dynamically. We go to, where do we load this? That's a good question. We just search for reflection, right? And find where that is. There's a whole bunch of things for some reason. There's other uses of reflection. Maybe I don't. Let's just go into game controller then. We'll see what game controller does, and we'll just follow the rabbit hole. All right, so game controller, you pass it a game, and game is just like a bunch of data, basically. And so it needs to create the whole controller level for that. So we add turn taker controllers. That's going to be the tree we follow down. We have a factory for that. Right, so actually here's the first case where we're given a turn taker, and the same thing, like turn takers sometimes have their own classes. They don't always, like heroes don't have their own. Do they? Maybe they do. There's legacy. There's no legacy turn taker controller. Is there? I thought. No, there's just the card controller. Oh right. So here it tries to find a deck-specific turn taker controller. If there isn't, it just like creates a generic one, which is why there's no legacy here. Like legacy doesn't do anything special, right? Like, I mean, he's special, but he's not. He doesn't work differently than any other hero, right? His turns work the same as every other hero, except like the Sentinels. The Sentinels have a turn taker controller because the Sentinels are weird. They have a special card. They have multiple character cards. They work differently than other heroes, and so they need their own code. So this is actually, this code is loading it. But let's go to the card factory, which is what I think is more common. Like most heroes are not going to need a turn taker controller. Villains typically do have a turn taker controller, and environments don't either. Cards. Cards? Is it just like card controller factory? Okay. So yeah. So here we're creating an instance of a card. Like we have the model object, and we are actually looking up a class for it. And we're saying it's Handelabra, Sentinels engine controller, and finding the namespace and identifier. You can see here it's legacy back this strike card controller fits right in there. And so we try to look up for a type for that. We use type.getType. If we find the type, so this is the reflection. Like C#, it knows it has an index of all these classes, even if they're never referenced. Like this is never referenced by anything else, but it's still compiled, and it's still there, and so we can actually look it up, which isn't the case for all languages. You can't really do that, but you can in C#, and you can expose your DLL can expose those, so other code can load your DLL and then do that. So we find the type. The type is the type. It's hard to explain that unless I'm doing a computer science course. We have the type of it, which is like the blueprint for it, right? Kind of like the code. It's like what gets created out of this code is the type. And then we have to instantiate it. We actually have to take that blueprint for what that thing is and make an instance of the thing. That's using this activator as a create instance method that you can say, here's a blueprint, a type, make one for me, please, and give it these parameters if it has a constructor for that. And we know that our card controllers have to have this constructor or they won't work. So then we have a send detect here to make sure that it's actually really what it's supposed to be, and then we've got it. We've made it, right? That's how we got Backfist Strike Card Controller, an actual instance of that. So we need to do this is what we need to do for like part of number 1, the second part of number 1, 1.5. So let's just grab this, and because that's kind of going to be part of what we need to do is. Oh, that was a big mess. Let's just do that. And then, yeah, so the namespace is, going to be something. Why don't we have string? Okay. The namespace isn't going to be like Handelabra whatever. It's going to be like whatever your mod's namespace is. So, yeah, we don't really need this. We're just going to be the class name is something. Class name is going to be something. It's going to be, what do we say? It's going to be like my mod.my class, my hero, my card. Sure. Same thing. We're going to try to find the type. Do we find the type? Right, and we need like some object result. And then we'll just log it in if we found it. Right, we need some sort of, maybe we'll just say there's no constructor right now. Makes it easier. Create an instance with no constructor. And we'll just say, we have all this extra checking. We'll just say the result is that. We can add that stuff later. And right, result is not always, we'll just say it starts out as null. And yeah, so if we run this right now, it's just going to be like, no, there's no such thing. So let's run it and see that's obviously should happen. I'm just going to comment out our other stuff that we don't need right now. So here we're just going to try it, load a type that doesn't exist. Oh, look, result, it's still null. So And we might throw a logging in here that couldn't find type. We can like debug in Unity. It's just like not great. It's possible. You can use the debugger and step through. So yeah, we couldn't find the type. That's what happened. So it actually like, the type was null, so we didn't do that. So we can do like, I don't know, sentinels.engine.game, model.game. Right, that's a class that is real. We should be able to instantiate it. No, couldn't find the type. Is that not? Handler Sentinels engine model dot game. I might have typed it wrong. That's what we do here, right? We just we could literally try to load the legacy one. Why don't we just do that? Legacy back fist strike card controller. Like this should just work too, right? Unless is there anything weird happening in this? I don't think so. Couldn't find the type. Why can we not find the type from here? Whoops, wrong project. Like we can literally type it in, right? Like we've got one. Well, do we need to provide? Yeah, so at this point, that's interesting. I don't know if that assembly is available for reflection to this code, but it's I can load type, right? As a class. Let's see. No, I mean, maybe nothing's working. String. Okay, I'm not crazy then. It did find the type. Because it was able to. And of course, it's not useful when it's string because, let's start date time. It actually will be something. Yeah, okay. So it actually made a date time object by finding the type of date time. I guess I could throw a log out here, right? Log type. And we can try using the debugger. You can actually look at stuff. That might be helpful for this case where it's well, I guess we're just not getting anything, right? So, and maybe the debugger is not even working. I don't know. So yeah, system.datetime. So why couldn't we find the other class name? I guess I could also look up mod loader. Can I get one of my own class? Yeah, so this warning comes out of Unity. It's no, don't do that. Don't make mono behaviors. That's just a thing. So we can't actually even get to the other assembly from reflection. Which is, I mean, okay, but it just seems... Let's just throw this in an error. That's I feel like if this isn't working, then nothing's gonna work. Type.getType DLL. requires the assembly, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't work for non-native types. Oh, you need to pass the assembly name. Like this. Oh, okay. It found the type then. Then it was complaining that that default constructor wasn't there, which is true. So if we say like instead, let's pass like game, and we like give it. I think that might have a default constructor. It probably doesn't, but right. I mean, I'm satisfied that this will work because it's finding the type. It's giving me an error because I'm not calling the right constructor, but it's gonna work. So, okay, we just need to pass as part of the class name. We need to pass the assembly. So that's good to know. That's sort of part, like, if we have the assembly loaded, then we can instantiate the class, right? So loading that DLL file is something we need to do. So we actually need to like make a DLL. Oh, we could always just use the Sentinels engine, but it seems like annoying to have to do that. Let's just like make a new DLL in Visual Studio. .NET library. Project name, my mod. My class. Is that what I called it already? I think I called it my card. My class is fine. Let's like just make some fields. Maybe string. So like if we can like instantiate this and look at the string, that seems good. Let's build it. Let's find it. Projects, my mod, bin, debug, my mod DLL. All right, so in here, like, you can't look at this file, but like you can look at it with text editor a bit. You can find that it has stuff. It has my class, things like that. The program cannot be run in DOS mode. I love that. So we have this mod. Let's just like get it into like an easier path, just like my home folder for now. And we want to like load it, right? We want to be in this environment. So that's already compiled. Like I don't need like just like make a note of like what it is. My mod.myClass. Yeah. Let's go back to that. So my mod.myClass is the name, and then empty constructor. So we want to be able to like basically do this, right? My mod.myClass, and the assembly is going to be called my mod as well. Just doesn't have to be the same, it's just coincidence. Right, and so when I run this now, obviously Unity's going to be like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of that. Yeah. So we need to load that DLL, and that's not something we actually do. Unity, load assembly at runtime. People search for this, and I've clicked on these before, as you can see. there are things to do. You obviously you can do this. Assembly.load from. System.reflection, of course. Okay. So all right, I don't think we need to worry about this part. We might have to. It'll give us some error if we try, though, right? I assume, and we'll be able to follow up with that. Load. We'll just try this. So assembly dot load from, load file, load from. I don't know which one. Reflection only load from. Let's try load from my mod.dll. Security evidence. Okay, let's just do it without anything. And var. Let's just see if that like does anything. This just like suddenly works. It's like, oh, that was easy. Job done. Nope, we get an error. File not found. Okay. That's because probably it doesn't know how to do this. /users/journal/mybot. Assembly. It loaded the assembly and it was able to find the what? It did it. Okay, so it did it. It did this part. So it found it and it made an instance of my class. That's cool. Does it work if I build the player? That's something that might not work. We'll see. We have our log still going here. Okay, that worked. So, that's good. That's very good. We successfully loaded the DLL and instantiated the class. So now, I mean, I'm glad we haven't run into a roadblock yet. I expected worse. Step 2, DLL should know about Sentinel stuff. That is different. Licky asks, we have all the hero themes? Well, I don't know all the hero themes. We have some of the hero themes, but yeah, lots of hero themes. People making villain versions of heroes and hero versions of villains that have their own names. I mean, there already are some of those, right? Luminary and so on. Omnitron X, the Dreamer. Okay. I'm excited by this progress. So let's see step 2. We need to... Let's just change this instant to load my mod. My mod. Projects. My mod. Solution. Alright. Cool. So what we want this, like, literally make this to be like a card controller, right? That's kind of the goal. If we can do that, then we've unlocked the secrets. So we need to reference the DLL here. We need to this project needs to know about the Sentinels stuff. So I'm just gonna like this is be like I guess I can literally like do this. Let's like find the game. I mean, it might be hard to find it. Basically, you can find those DLLs. Remember when I like showed you where it was in here? I guess I can do it that way. It might disappear if I do a build though, right? Basically, the DLLs ship with the game, so you can reference them from your .NET project as well. But I'm just going to reference them like from a different spot because it's easier. Just into the plugins folder. So those are going to be like in our template projects. It'll like point to the Steam version of the game, basically, right? It's just quicker for me to do it this way. So here, then we can use Handelabra, Sentinels, Engine, Controller. Cool, and we need to actually implement the proper constructor of that. So I should actually have another instance of Visual Studio. Got a lot of Visual Studio projects, but you'll only need to have one. When doing this, I need to have 3. We open Sentinels Engine. So this is what the constructor looks like. And honestly, let's just call it my card controller. And we need to, that's why we reference that model, because the constructor takes a card. All right. Oh, and right. Should actually change the class name. All right, so, and we have too many, I don't know, we have so many brackets. So now we're just changing the name of this class to my card controller and giving it, it's now actually a subclass of that. And yeah, I mean, if we're like this, it can like just access the stuff, right? So it like do stuff. Let's just do this for now. I'm actually gonna like get the path of this output file because projects mod bin debug that. Okay. We can get the path by just like throwing it in a terminal. I don't want to actually run it. I just want to copy it. All right, back to, I know this is confusing because we're like going through like 3 different environments in context of what everything is. I'll see you later, remote error. Right, so the class name is now going to be my card controller. And that path is just the full thing, so we don't have to like keep copying that file around because that's annoying. And then we can just delete this one. So now back in Unity, we can run this, and so that's the type. Found the type. Oh no, it couldn't find the constructor, which is correct, right? Because now it's a card controller. It needs different parameters. Where's not that? This button. This. Right, it expects a card and a turn taker controller. I guess I could just like pass nulls. So this is how you do that. You like without actually like here, Unity doesn't have these things. I can't like go like new my mod dot card controller because it doesn't exist at this time. It's like only at runtime it has that. So I need to actually pass these in a sort of weird way through activator. And we're just going to actually pass 2 nulls in, which doesn't do any. Actually, it might just not work because the default constructor probably cares what those have, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, there's an exception because you can't do that. Because that's funny. What we can do is just make like a fake. We're actually we're gonna do this. We're gonna like make this fake game controller in game and pass in other objects from that other game. Game dot card get all cards dot first, just whatever the first card is, that's the card, and whatever the first term taker is the other parameter. This is silly, but it should work. It should be silly, but work. Mainly it's proof of concept, right? Hey, look, we got a my card controller. Then we can ask it things. We don't really need to because this is all going to happen under the hood. I wonder if I can... How do you, like, get... You probably need, like, reflection, right, to get... You don't even know. You just have an object. I don't even know what this is. Actually, I know it's a card controller, right? Card controller. Even though I don't know what the subclass is, I know that it's a card controller. So I can, like... ask it things. I can just ask it, like, what's your card? What's your card? Then the card's going to be, like, the one that I sent up here. Right? That should work. Yeah, it's Legacy's character card. That was the first card. Cool. All right. That counts for this, right? The DLL knows about Sentinel stuff. I could, like, go into this and say card dot... I don't think I could change the title, but I could say, like, set hit points 10. And we should see right now, but previously it was the starting hit points, but now when it's going to run that code, right? It's going to run that constructor code, which is going to change the hit points to 10. Don't do this, but this is what my testing is doing. Just full warning, don't do that. Hit points is 10. So yeah, that worked. So this is our mod, right? This is not all the way to a mod, but it's step 2. So thumbs up. Step 3 is more than I'm doing today. So step 3 is being able to say new game, my hero, right? So that's going to involve more stuff. More game's going to be the game's going to be able to either we need to load the assembly here. We probably need to load the assembly here, and then, like, tell game, like, here's where you find the mod files for the definitions, and here's in game controller, here's the namespace and stuff like that. Because you saw that it was all sort of hard coded to be Handelabra namespace, and it won't. And we need to let it support other namespaces. But honestly, this is all really good. I guess I should do a build to make sure that all of this part works too, and not just in the editor. Let's do that. All this stuff also, by the way, will not work on iOS because that sort of thing is not allowed on iOS. I mean, it might run, but it'll just, like, be empty or throw an exception. Okay, let's check our log here. I guess I could, like, have it actually show something on the screen, but that's more work than debug.log. Yeah. We found the type, we made it class, we made an instance, and we modified the model, like, directly in the constructor, which is not what we do, but when we're doing this test, we did it. And I feel good. That gives me, I mean, when I was researching this before, people were like, you can't do this, it crashes, or it doesn't work, or blah, blah, blah. And there's, like, all these other threads are like, this is super impossible, or, like, it's going to be a big deal. And so I was like, all right, this is going to be like a couple dev streams just trying to get the DLL loading. But turns out it just sort of works. So that is excellent. So what I'm going to do next time is this part. Like, what I want to do next time is maybe go back to my Google Doc. So, yeah, like, this worked using, like, what, assembly.load from, like, that was it. And, like, type.get type and activator create instance like we normally do. So that's pretty cool. So next step, having game and game controller load stuff from the assembly. So that's one thing I'm not sure is like, is the engine calls this, is that going to work at that level, or do I need to like call these things at this level and then send them down? I'm not sure about that. We need the deck list. So like deck list file, card controller class, basically. Be able to be loaded. And I think we could, so next Friday is going to be like more of a full day. Today was like the announcement and the meeting and everything, so it's a little less programming and stuff. But next week's going to be more of a full day. So we should be able to get through, hopefully, this, at least sort of prototyping, make sure that can work. It might be a little sort of hacky. We'll probably bring in David and Jean-Marc maybe the following week to like finish that and make it work properly. Then there's also this big loading resource from disk, so that's not something I'm going to get into probably this week, maybe next week, depending on if that other part goes really quickly. That's something we could look at, doing this stuff too. So that's pretty promising. So that's like basically this is what I do when I'm looking at like, how do I do this weird thing we've never done, is like start messing around with what I know, plus researching on Google, plus thinking about it. So, and try stuff. And that's really what a lot of development is. And I think it's, you learn how to do it in an effective way. So I think it's easy to, if you don't have experience, you do more random stuff, but eventually you get better at knowing like what you should be trying. And you're not always right, but sometimes you get it right. And today, I'll take it. I'll take the win. Everything worked pretty much to what I was hoping for it to work. So we have some. I'll set up a Trello board. Maybe I'll make that like step one. Set up a Trello board. So I want to like put this all on the main Sentinels board, and like there's just lots of stuff on those boards. So I'll make a new Trello board that's just about this project. And so that we can have it like, we can follow it along during the dev streams and everything, and follow our progress and organize all this stuff, and instead of just a Google Doc, which is kind of a mess. So that's going to be it for today, I think. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend. And don't forget to vote. Cytosine went to vote. You can vote too if you're in the States, but if you're not in the States, or maybe you're somewhere else with an election, vote in that election. It's been great. I'm looking forward to these dev streams every week, and interacting with you all. So, and obviously looking forward to mods. So, have a great weekend, and we'll see you. Actually, tomorrow is a special Sentinels stream because we're not doing Spirit Island Saturday. We're doing Sentinels Saturday we haven't actually announced this, but we're going to, with you as the guests. It's going to be whoever's watching can join in and play with us over Discord and over online Sentinels multiplayer. So if you want to play with me and Seamus Butler, Jeff Dugan might be around, maybe some other special guests might be around, but you can be a special guest. And we're trying something that maybe we can use more often in the future. We're prototyping a new way to have guests, so we'll see. Should be fun. Come celebrate Sentinels and play with us, and should be a lot of fun. So we're excited. I'm glad you are also excited. We'll see you tomorrow for Sentinels, and later on for more streams. Bye.